And I've got this email this morning already. The reason why housing is so expensive in the Highlands is the cashed-up retirees being able to pay cash. True. Also, the supply is low and the demand is high. And the self-funded retiree market moving out of Sydney is pretty big, as we know. And it was interesting. I mentioned it to Ian this morning. I was talking to one of our real estate agents yesterday afternoon. And he was saying that 75% of the business that goes through his real estate agency is people over 55 that are retirees that sell their property in Sydney. They want to get out into a regional or country area, particularly after COVID or through COVID. And they're cashed up and they come down here and they look at a property and basically purchase it cash. So they're living in the Southern Highlands after being successful, after basically squirreling their money away and coming down here and purchasing, which is a great thing, and we welcome them all. But it does put a pressure on those people that can't do that and are paying off mortgages or have to rent. But we'll find out more this morning when we speak to Carolyn Doherty from the Argyle Housing Organisation, who do a wonderful job here in the Southern Highlands. And we'll see what she has to say this morning in regard to all of this, because she certainly knows what's going on. In fact, she's on the line right now, and it's a very good morning to you, Carolyn. How are you?
I'm great, Graeme. How are you?
Not so bad. Well, this housing situation in the Southern Highlands, no one would know more about the ups, the downs and roundabouts than you would. That's for sure.
Definitely. Our bread and butter, for sure.
What is the situation? First of all, before we go any further, many people may have heard about Argyle Housing but don't know exactly what you do. Just explain to our new listeners and our listeners that do know what you're all about, what you do there in the organisation.
Yeah, so Argyle Housing is a not-for-profit organisation. We're what's known as a Tier 1 community housing provider. So we provide social and affordable housing to people in regional areas. We cover from southwest Sydney all the way down to the border at Albury and out as far as Griffith and into the ACT. So essentially we're providing social housing to people in the highest need. So usually people that are on the public housing waiting list who might have complex barriers that are preventing them from being able to rent in the private rental market, as well as providing affordable housing to key workers, which is housing that's discounted to a market from market rent. So around 75% of the price of private rental.
Mm-hmm. And going through those areas you cover, there'd be different age groups that are affected, different dynamics, I'd imagine, too.
Yeah, look, absolutely. And we do have some specialist programs that are focused towards particular demographics. We've had a program that we've been operating in a couple of locations over the last couple of years during the pandemic, where we've been working to house rough sleepers, so people that have been on the street, putting them into long-term housing and providing them with wraparound services, but all the way through to older women in housing. So women over the age of 55 who've found themselves in housing stress or homeless. It's long-term housing that they can age in place.
Here in the Southern Highlands, you've got a situation where, and it's been, the job market's been affected because a lot of people are saying we just can't afford to work there because of the rentals and what have you. Now, look, we hear people talk about social housing. I have the view, and you may be able to put me straight here, but I say in the Southern Highlands, there'll never be affordable housing. And when I say that, I mean what people think in their minds. Because we hear about affordable housing going up to the federal election. We hear about the situation as far as social housing. What is the reality here in the Southern Highlands?
Well, I think what you raise is a really good point. What the community knows affordable housing is probably quite different to what gets spoken about during the election. So quite often when you hear politicians talk about affordable housing and what the majority of the community think about affordable housing is housing that's affordable to purchase. And the reality is that in Australia now we have, another issue in that rental prices have actually escalated so much over the last couple of decades, particularly in the last 5 years, that we're actually seeing people who are in, good professional positions, teachers, nurses, key workers that every community relies upon, in a situation where they're not even able to not just buy a house, but they can't even afford to rent a house.
Right.
And so what that means is those communities, and the Highlands is a great example, start losing those key workers, and you start seeing experiences where, you know, you don't have enough nurses in your hospitals, you don't have enough, shop attendants, you don't have enough people to make your coffee, you don't have enough people to do those really essential things that happen in every community that keep it vibrant and keep it, moving. So affordable housing, as I know it, and our bread and butter is where we're actually supplying housing that is affordable to those key workers in a rental sense.
Okay. What pressure is on the Southern Highlands? We hear of people lining up to get rentals. Obviously, with what I've been talking about this morning in regard to retirees that come down here and they can just pay cash for a house, which means it takes a supply. How critical are all these factors in the Southern Highlands with people basically not being able to house themselves?
Look, very, very critical. I think Southern Highlands has been fairly unique in a lot of ways over the last couple of years because of the pandemic. What's happened is a lot of people that were living in apartments or in smaller properties in the CBD have high disposable incomes. They've sold those properties usually at premium prices and have decided to relocate down into the Highlands, which obviously offer them a much better lifestyle, particularly during those lockdown periods. We now have a lot more people that are able to work hybrid arrangements, and the transportation into Sydney is really very good. And so what that's done is drive up prices. We've seen a lot of properties that have gone on the market and the prices have gone up astronomically. We've seen instances ourselves, because we do lease some properties from the private rental market, where, the rents are proposed at being $200 more per week in a particular property, and we just can't afford to take those properties either. So we're in a position ourselves where we're having diminishing supply in the Southern Highlands, which is a real shame.
From the perspective of people ringing you and saying, I am desperate, and look, I've had to sleep in my car or I'm couch surfing, are the numbers higher than what people would realise in the Highlands?
Yeah, absolutely they are. And, what we're seeing yesterday, and I was only talking to a local MP about this yesterday, is that we're seeing people for the first time ever who are trying to get housed through the social housing register purely for economic reasons. In the past, it's been people that have had really complex barriers to housing. Nowadays, we're actually seeing more and more people apply for public housing purely because they can't afford to rent anywhere else. But, it's a significant issue in the Southern Highlands community. We have a lot of people that are actually really struggling and being forced out of the community or being forced into homelessness as a consequence.
You've been working in the industry for quite a number of years.
Yep.
If I was to ask you, how do we fix it, what would be the answer?
Oh, goodness me.
I knew you'd say that because no one seems to be able to.
It's my magic wand. Look, Graeme, I think, the solution requires every level of government to be working together with the community housing sector. The community housing sector I guess, a really critical part of the social and affordable housing space, because we have enormous capacity to be able to leverage assets that we have title on to be able to build and develop more social and affordable housing. We've also entered into some great partnership with some local government areas as well to deliver some really innovative social and affordable housing opportunities in those communities. And there's a lot of local government areas that are very, very interested in doing that. So that's a really critical part of the puzzle. But really, what we've seen, sadly, over a number of years is that state governments, particularly who have the carriage for social housing, have taken a position where they're funding social housing supply not through infrastructure, but actually through leasing programs, which allow us to access the private market to be able to secure housing on a grants basis, but it doesn't actually bring any new supply into the market. And what we have across the board, whether it's home ownership or rental, is a shortage nationally of housing. And so we really need to have a strong commitment from every level of government to be able to increase the supply of housing across Australia.
Okay, thanks for your time this morning. And it must be testing for you and your team when you do have these people basically say, I can't find anywhere to live.
Yeah, it's really hard. It's quite heartbreaking at the moment. We've got a lot of clients that are actually ringing up and having to even say, with the cost of living pressures added to the existing housing stress, that I can't afford to pay the rent this week because I need to make that choice to feed my kids. Yeah. So we're doing a lot of work with emergency relief services as well to try and help families get access to food services and relief around their essential services like electricity, so that they can continue to sustain their housing as well. It's a difficult choice for anyone to be in.
Okay, great to talk to you. Thanks for your time, and the team's doing a wonderful job at Argyle Housing.
Thanks, Graeme. Appreciate your time.
Great to talk.
Have a good day.
Bye-bye. Carolyn Doherty from Argyle Housing. And when you get your property press and flip it open and see those $3.5, $4, $5 million properties, or properties that are around the 1.2, which is around about the average these days, think about the backstory. Those people that can't even afford the rent, and they've got to feed their kids and put food on the table and their families before they even think about rent. It's happening right here, right now in the Southern Highlands. You may have some views on it.